I think it was yesterday that I told you that it would be the toughest lecture that you had to listen to. I lied. Now I'm going to give it to you. No, I know. It really was the toughest of the lectures that I brought to present to you. However, I'm going to just apologize in advance. This is going to be a hard lecture, not conceptually, but we've got to cover a lot of ground. I've got to refute Plato, the Mormons, and the Moonies all in one 45-minute period, so I'm going to have to talk really fast, okay? At this point, someone might say, well, Dr. Bahnsen, I understand how you have just, knocked off atheism. And anybody who wants to run to irrationality as well. I appreciate that. But that doesn't cover all the options out there. And so we're going to go back to our chart. Remember I said I'll first deal with atheistic materialism? Now, please do not give up, the tools that I have equipped you with in dealing with these other points of view. Because in many cases, they will be helpful in doing an apologetic witness to other worldviews. Please don't forget that. But in order to make this of maximum benefit to you, I'm just going to put aside those arguments, and I'm going to continue doing apologetics, but I'm going to do it in a different way, same technique, but different questions, different problems, with two other approaches to trying to come up with a worldview. The atheist is left with a materialistic worldview. But now let's talk about a philosopher or any kind of philosophy that says, oh, we believe in mind and body, not just body. We believe that there's not only a physical universe, but there's also a realm of ideas or a mental realm or a spiritual realm of some sort. Although I'll try not to say spiritual because you tend to think religious then, and that's going to be our third option. I want to have you consider a philosophy that believes there's not only the physical domain, but there's also the non-physical domain, but it's a secular philosophy. That is, it's not one that's governed by ritual and religious dogma and things of that nature. We'll come to that next. Because after we get done with Plato, and the people that are like Plato, then the tendency will be for you to think, oh yeah, okay, you can answer all the secular philosophies, atheistic as well as dualistic, but then what do you do with other religions? And then so I want to show you how you deal with other religions and cults as well. So that's what we're going to cover in the next few minutes. That's why I'm going to be talking just like this. Plato. I taught you a little bit about him already. Plato did not believe that the physical world was ultimate reality. In fact, he thought that it was at best the secondary reality. The physical world is always changing. And because it's always changing, it cannot be the object of knowledge. For whatever it is that we know, it is unchanging. The object of knowledge does not move around. It's not in flux. And so since this world is always changing, then the ultimate object of knowledge is not this world. It must be another world, one that's not like this changing world of time and space. Okay? When I put 2 up on the board yesterday, up on the slate, and then I destroyed it so that, I don't know, did anyone feel different about last night? Realizing that there was no 2-ness left in reality after what Dr. Bahnsen did? No, I tricked you into saying that was 2. That wasn't 2 that I put up on the board, was it? It was a numeral. It was a representation of 2. Y'all remember that? If you don't, go like this. Wake up. 2 exists somewhere other than on my slate here. 2 can't be found in this world. It's not in your refrigerator. You can't stub your toe on it. 2 doesn't exist like that. 2's of a different order. By the way, so is the concept of humanity. Humanity doesn't exist in this world, but humans do. And duckness doesn't exist in this world, but ducks do. And so what Plato said is there must be a realm for all these ideas. The idea of 2, the idea of duck, the idea of human. Now there's a little inconsistency that's kind of humorous. You don't want to nag about this, but Plato was embarrassed to say that there was a form or idea for some other sorts of things. He didn't think there was a form for hair or warts or for poo-poo. He thought all those things, there's no need for a form for those things. And one has got to wonder what's wrong with this guy, when he's that inconsistent. But anyway, For all the noble concepts such as goodness, justice, beauty, truth, duck, giraffe, human, there is a realm of ideas or ideals where they are found. So in this world, we find Huey, Dewey, and Louie out on the pond in duckness in heaven above. Although I hate saying heaven above because that makes it sound religious. It was really not religious. For Plato, there is a realm of ideals. Now, I'm going to refute Plato. I'm going to try to refute Plato this afternoon. But I want you to be aware that there are many people who wouldn't call themselves Platonists that have this same basic problem. They want to say that all there is this physical cosmos, matter in motion. But then they want to believe in something like love or justice or fair play as well. And they may not be as sophisticated as Plato in developing this realm of the forms and the relationship between the forms and things in this world, but they are under the skin brothers with Plato or sisters. Okay? So there are other forms of idealism than just the one we're talking about. But you're just going to have to take this on authority, trust me, please. The most rigorous form of idealism in the history of Western thought is Plato's. And so if we can deal with what I think is the toughest guy on the block, then hopefully you'll learn how to deal with the other ones too. So let's get back to Plato. Plato says there's a realm of duckness and horseness and justice and love and all the triangularities up there too. In fact, everything you can think about, unless it's disreputable like warts, everything you can think about has a form in that realm. Now, in this world of time and space, we find particulars. For instance, 3 ducks, Huey, Dewey, and Louie out on the pond. So particulars are in this world of time and space and matter. Universals, that is the universal idea of duck, is in a different realm. What do you think of this? It really is. What's one of the things you would be inclined to ask Plato if you were talking to him?
How do you know?
Good. Somebody was listening. You're always going to be asking, how do you know? How do you know? Plato, how do you know there is another realm? By the way, Plato works right into the apologist's hands at that point because his answer, unlike what other people less sophisticated might say, his answer would be I've never seen that other realm because it is not open to the senses. But there must be such another realm. It's a rational necessity. If there is no other realm like that, then we cannot make sense of our experience. Now, not everyone needs to listen to this next couple of sentences or so because it probably won't make sense to you. But those of you who have really been paying attention to this will understand now, I think, why the church, especially in the ancient church, had such a problem. We had people who wanted to say Plato was a crypto-Christian, that Plato really represents the Christian worldview, but he didn't have the advantage of hearing from Moses and the prophets and so forth. And so some Christian apologists made what I think is a huge mistake, but nevertheless you can see, I think, why they might make this mistake. They wanted to put Plato right at the gate of heaven. This guy was pretty good. Not good enough, maybe. Maybe he's a second-class citizen. There are different approaches. But that isn't going to cut it. The point is, Plato said there has to be something more than this world, or this world doesn't make sense. But let's look at how he tried to make sense of this world. You know who first refuted Plato to his utter embarrassment? His mother. No. Came home one day and said, Plato, what is all this nonsense about duckness? Wash your hands and sit down to dinner. No, his best student refuted him. Very good. Everyone hear that? Who was Plato's best student? Aristotle. Who was Aristotle's best known student? What? One at a time. Who was Aristotle's best known student? Alexander the Great. Exactly. Just so you know that philosophers make a difference in this world somehow. Anyway, Aristotle's response to Plato is still classic. Aristotle, I'm going to paraphrase here. You wouldn't want to hear the classical Greek anyway. Aristotle said, "What good is an unchanging form outside of this world?" Big deal, Plato. We never encounter these forms, these ideas, these ideals. How can they help us explain anything? And Aristotle added this, which was a real touch. He said, especially, how can they explain motion? The most pervasive characteristic of the world in which we live is motion. And you've got these unchanging, blocks, as it were, triangularity, love, and justice. How do they help us explain what happens in this world? Aristotle was the first one to say, that was, so heavenly as to be of no earthly good. You've got this philosophy that answers the problem of how there can be laws of logic, laws of morality. In that case, it would be unchanging moral values, goodness and justice, whatever. You've got that, but they don't have any relationship to this world. Now, what did Plato think the relationship of those ideals or forms was to this world of time and space? He said, the things of this world participate in their form. Yeah. Participate in their form? The best Plato could do to explain this is different actors participate in a role. And he said that's kind of like what it is. All the ducks in this world are like all trying out for duckness. They're all playing the part of duckness. So there are many actors, but only one role. Dreadful philosophy. Well, it's worse. What you're going to do if you criticize that very simply is you're going to say, oh, that's great. We're coming down to finally understand the basic nature of reality, and you resort to a metaphor. Well, it's worse than that. Plato, how is it that the forms end up informing the material world? See, the ducks are made out of matter. Think of it this way. Your mother's making cookies. She's rolled out the dough. She's got a little duck-like cookie cutter. And she comes along and she imposes the cookie cutter on the dough, and now we've got 3 duck-like cookies. Okay? But now what if your mother never brought the cookie cutter and the dough together? Would we ever get any ducks or any duck cookies? No. And so Plato can't just say there's another realm of ideas like justice and duckness and so forth. He's got to bring that realm of ideas into contact with the physical world in which we live. And so Plato knew that. He wasn't dumb. In fact, he's one of the most brilliant men that ever lived as an unbeliever. And when Plato was pushed on how the forms informed the physical world, he said he didn't know and he had to resort to a myth. Now that's Plato talking, not Dr. Bahnsen. Plato said that he would have to resort to a myth to explain it. And he said the demiurge, they used to call him Demi for short, the Demi imposed the forms on the material world many years ago. Good. Some of you are sitting there saying, that's a philosophical explanation? That's a story. And it's not even a story Plato believes is literally true. So let's get back to the point, Plato. How do you get your forms, your laws of logic? How do you get your universals? How do you get your moral absolutes? How do you get your class concepts? How do you get all those things into this world? To which the greatest philosopher, the greatest idealist philosopher in the history of Western thought said, beats me. So he loses, don't you see? You cannot have a worldview that just arbitrarily says, well, it's kind of like an actor playing a role, or like the demiurge making cookies. That's just not going to cut it philosophically. And that's why his greatest student, Aristotle, went a completely different direction. Aristotle said, I don't care about anything that exists outside of time and space. The only thing that's going to be helpful to us are things that exist in time and space. Then, of course, you go right back to the materialism that although Aristotle was not technically an atheist, he was, from our standpoint, as good as an atheist, and you start dealing with that. But Aristotle realized that Plato's attempt to bring ideals or class concepts or laws into his explanations had no account, could not be justified. He could believe it, but he couldn't justify it. And what did we say? To know something, you have a justified true belief. Plato may have had a true belief, I'm not sure if it's true, Aristotle said, but it's certainly not justified. We have no way of knowing about these things. Now, people who are idealists in the more run-of-the-mill, garden variety American sense, people who believe in Santa Claus. Well, they don't believe literally in Santa Claus, but they believe in the ideals of Christmas, or they believe in goodwill, they believe in fair play and love and so forth. When you start hitting them with your apologetic about materialism, they'll probably tell you, I believe in moral absolutes. They might even say they believe in God, but then we're going to get down to the third option in a minute. They might say, well, there's no God, but I do believe in justice. What you're going to do is ask them, from within your worldview, how can justice be absolute? In your worldview, everything's changing, and everything's subjective. So there can't be any objective, absolute notion of justice that you apply. And by the way, the world's not a very happy place if there's no justice either, so you can just forget all your goodwill at Christmas time also. There are no ideals or ideas that you can justify. But if they were to say, no, I really think they exist, you're going to say, where? And how do they exist? Where'd they come from? Or best of all, because sometimes they'll blow off those questions and say, well, I don't know where they came from and it's not important. Best of all, you're going to say, what's the relationship between your ideals in this world in which we live? That's the problem Plato couldn't answer. That's the problem that no idealist can answer. I have more I want to tell you about Plato, but I'm afraid that if I do, we'll run out of time for the other things. So if you have questions about idealism, this is just going to be the simple approach. Idealists or dualists who believe there's two types of reality are going to always have to face the question, how do you bring the two types of reality into relationship with each other? Okay, now somebody else is going to come along, though, and is going to say, well, I've got an answer to that. I've got ideals, I've got laws, I've got moral absolutes, and I have them because I am an adherent of another kind of religion. So there goes your worldview apologetic, Dr. Bahnsen. It's great for atheists, it's great for secular dualists, but it won't touch me. Okay. A quick course in comparative religion. 3 basic kinds of religious philosophies. If you want to cut the cake differently, find a more efficient way, that's fine, but I think this works pretty well. 3 kinds of religious philosophies will be found. First of all, there are religions of transcendent mysticism. Religions of this sort place an emphasis upon what goes beyond man's experience. They are transcendent religions, and they come to be mystical in their outlook. That is, they eventually give up rationality and they say it's some kind of internal intuition or enlightenment or experience that governs religion. Religions of transcendent mysticism. The opposite of that are religions of eminent moralism. In these religions, the stress is not upon what transcends man's experience, but rather what's near at hand, the eminent, the close, the nearby. Some of these religions are actually atheistic, like Buddhism. They reject any transcendent reality at all. Their stress, whether they are atheistic or not, though, is on a God or religious forces that are close at hand, not outside of the cosmos or our experience, but very much part of our experience. And they tend to become, for that very reason, religions that are moralistic rather than mystical. Rather than stressing inner enlightenment, intuition, or an irrational concept or contact with God, they stress a moralistic or ethical code that must be lived out if you would be a religious person. Good example, Confucianism. You probably as children, would misuse the little expression Confucius say. But you see, that is part of Confucianism, is following the teachings of the master. That's a religion of eminent moralism. And then the other religions are biblical counterfeits. These are religions which in one way or another have been influenced by the Bible or are conceptually very much like the biblical approach to God, but are counterfeits. They have perverted the true revelation of God in one way or another. And there are three subdivisions in the biblical counterfeits that I think would be helpful for you to remember. Those religions which are biblical counterfeits tend to be either polytheistic, Unitarian, or pseudo-messianic. First, polytheistic. They have a biblical-like view of God. Not at all the biblical view, but they have things that they've picked up from the Bible, so they have that kind of a view of God, but they think there are many of them. Now, what example comes to your mind? Anybody who studied the cults. What cult is polytheistic, but has picked up its general idea of God from the Bible? The Mormons, exactly. Now, it's not a real close likeness, to be sure, but they still talk about God in ways that have connections with Christianity, and yet they believe there are many of them. There are also Unitarian biblical perversions. That is, religions that follow the Bible are a biblical-like view of God, but they don't believe in the Trinity. They believe that there's only one person that is God, or one person that is fully God. Now, what religion of the Middle East comes to your mind as a religion that is Unitarian? Islam, exactly. Can you think of any Christian cult that is Unitarian? Well-known one? Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay, good. What's that?
United Pentecostal.
Okay, but I think better known would be Jehovah's Witnesses. Good answer. And now, pseudo-messianic biblical counterfeits are, just as the title puts it, they have false saviors. They have a leader which they put in the place of Jesus. And I think perhaps the most notorious example of late would be the Moonies, where Sun Myung Moon comes to be, in fact, the third Messiah that takes the place of the failed second Messiah, Jesus. So pseudo-messianic counterfeits of the Bible. Different approaches to worldviews. Atheistic materialism says there's one kind of thing and it's physical. Platonic dualism says there's two kinds of things, body and soul, so forth. Ideas as well as the physical world. We've dealt with them. We now are with religious worldviews, of which there are three kinds. Ones that say the emphasis should be on what transcends man's experience, those that say it should be part of man's experience, and those that in one way or another are aping the Bible, of which there are three kinds: polytheistic, Unitarian, and pseudo-messianic. I hope, even if you don't remember the vocabulary, you'll remember the conceptual scheme, because this is the hat rack you need to hang things on. If you know how to deal with each one of these categories, then you will be set free of this bondage that many apologists are in, where they think they have to master all the details of all the religions and all the philosophies before they're going to be adequate to defend the faith. If you understand what the basic possibilities, concepts are, then whatever comes along, just keep your opponent talking and he'll hang himself, because you know the right questions to ask. I'm going to try to very quickly run through these various religious types and take one illustration and do a refutation of it. First, a religion of transcendent mysticism. Hinduism is the outstanding illustration in the history of the world of transcendent mysticism. I've already explained to you what Hindus believe. They believe that this world is illusion. They believe that we're all trying to get to nirvana. We're only going to get there if we meditate and get off of the wheel of life. We're all building up karma in this world. Some of you are building up bad karma right now while I'm talking. And after this life is over, your karma will determine whether you come back as an aardvark or as a Brahma bull, or better yet, you finally get to enter the shoreless ocean and be spliced back into the one of all things. Now, we've talked about that. I've also refuted that. Remember the Hare Krishna? Hare Krishna is, if you will, a denomination of Hinduism. They wouldn't like me to put it that way, but that's what it amounts to. It's a variant of Hinduism. And the way in which the Hare Krishna is refuted is the way that the Hindu can be refuted. If you don't remember what that is, you can pick up the tape and listen again. Let me just add a couple things to that. Whenever somebody comes to you peddling a religious point of view or any point of view, what did I tell you have to keep asking? How do you know? Okay, now, temptation is for some people to think that when you press the Hindu with how do you know, he's going to say it's in the Bhagavad Gita. In the same way that if somebody comes to me and says, how do you know Jesus is the Son of God, I appeal to the Bible. So they've got their Bhagavad Gita, I've got my Bible, and I guess it's just, standoff that can't be resolved. Well, in the first place, you need to know about functioning Hinduism that it is not a scriptural religion. That is not to say that it does not have its sacred writings. But the Bhagavad Gita does not function for the Hindu in the way that the Bible does for the evangelical Christian. But that's valuable information in itself. When you go off to college and you have these comparative religion profs start running all these things together, you need to go, whoa, 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 whoa. You mean the Hindu goes to the Bhagavad Gita to get his creedal position and his moral norms, and they resolve their disputes rationally by appealing to the text of their sacred scripture? Not. It doesn't work that way. The Bhagavad Gita is there for anybody who wants to ride. You have your sacred teachers, you have these people who have received enlightenment, they go to the Bhagavad Gita, and that gives them a literary launching pad, if you will. But it is not a rational verbal authority in the way that the Bible is. But even if it were, what would be the next question? If somebody says, well, it's in the Bhagavad Gita, you're going to say, well, why do you believe the Bhagavad Gita? The Hindu says, well, you smart aleck Christian, why do you believe the Bible? And you're going to say, because without the biblical worldview, there's not a basis for believing anything. Hindu says, no, I have a basis for believing things. You say, fine. And it's kind of like, name that tune then. Open the Bhagavad Gita and justify the laws of logic for me. Justify scientific inference. Justify moral absolutes. That's going to be tough to do since the Bhagavad Gita teaches that there is no true distinction between good and evil. You see, how can I put this? I feel frustrated. Often, people get a little sampling of what presuppositionalism is, and then they think, oh, well, that's easy to get rid of. Anybody that's got a religious book can say what you guys are saying. Well, they haven't understood presuppositionalism. Because we're not saying we've got our book and it's better than yours. Nya, 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 nya. That's not our apologetic. Our apologetic is God has revealed himself. He's the ultimate authority. Therefore, we believe it on his say-so. And if you don't, you're reduced to foolishness. Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age, Paul says? Hasn't God made foolish the wisdom of this world? Now the problem with, I'm not going to find it, the problem with that little breakdown I gave you about religious worldviews is that people think, oh, well, if you call it a religious worldview, then it plays by different rules. No, it doesn't. When the religious worldview is presented to you, you can just strip off the fact that it's religious. It is, as far as you're concerned, a worldview. And you do the same internal critique and ask the same tough questions, and you will find that people do not have an out by appealing to the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so much with Hinduism. Don't forget the refutation of the Hare Krishna. On your worldview, I'm already in nirvana, which will lead him ultimately to either give up Hare Krishna, Hinduism, or to give up logic. Okay, religions of eminent moralism. Leading illustration of a religion of eminent moralism would have to be Buddhism. The founder of Buddhism, Gautama Siddhartha, grew up in a Hindu environment He was led to renounce a life of luxury. He renounced the world. And then he saw a vision of 4 passing sights, according to Buddhist tradition. He saw an old man, he saw a sick man, a dead man, and a shaven monk. This led him to join an ascetic Hindu cult, where he almost beat himself to death. I don't know how this works. You know, you see a dead man, you see a shaven monk, you say, well, given the options, I'll be a monk. He renounced the world. He almost died for doing so. And then he said, maybe we better find the meaning of suffering and how to avoid it. And this is when he says he discovered the middle way between pleasure and suffering. This enlightenment came to him under a fig tree, where he says Mara, the evil one of Hinduism, was tempting him. Why am I telling you this story? Some of you should be sitting there saying, it does seem to have a few literary connections with another book we know. Buddha was tempted under the fig tree by Mara, the evil one. He went on to say, by the way, there were no gods. I don't know how this works then. It's kind of like a ladder that he uses to climb up to the roof, and then once he's told his story, he throws the ladder away. He told them that he was tempted by Mara, the evil one. He overcame the temptation of Mara, and because of that, he became the enlightened one, which means the Buddha, for which he went into rapture for 49 days. Now, there's something wrong with the human race, according to Buddha. Namely, there's a lot of suffering out there. And Buddha said, I don't want you to believe what I'm going to tell you because I'm saying it. I want you to believe it because you experience it. Now notice right away, he's made this a religion of eminent moralism. It's eminent because he says, you're not to accept any outside authority. Don't accept it because the gods say it, there are no gods. Don't accept it because I say it, I don't have authority. Accept it only when it becomes so eminent that it's part of your experience. So this is the experience religion as you go religion. You learn your religion through your experience. Buddhism denies the supernatural. It is atheistic, as I've told you. It's a religion of personal experience. And primarily, it stresses having experiences which will eliminate suffering. Where does suffering come from? Suffering comes from man's desire. I told you about Stoicism yesterday. The Stoic says the reason why you get uptight and frustrated is because you're going contrary to the flow. You're out on the freeway and it's bumper-to-bumper traffic and you're saying, I want to get to the concert on time, I want to get to the concert on time, and that's why your blood pressure goes up. The Stoic says, chill out. Don't have the desire to get to the concert on time and there won't be any frustration. Well, Buddha was kind of like that. Buddha said, if there weren't human desires, then there wouldn't be any human suffering. It's kind of like eliminate the problem. Don't desire anything. Suffering will cease when desires cease, he said. And the cessation of desire comes with perfect detachment. And you will be perfectly detached from the world if you follow the eightfold path. Notice the moralistic cast of this religion. You've got to do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that. It's moralistic with the goal of getting rid of desire and in so doing getting rid of suffering. You must believe the right things. You must be free from lust. You must use the right speech. Your conduct must be charitable and you don't kill anything. You must have the right kind of livelihood, one that promotes life. You must express the will to overcome evil. You must be aware that the body is loathsome. What? I don't know where he got it. And you must meditate correctly. You have to have the proper yoga and mantra and all the rest. Okay, now how do you deal with a religion of eminent moralism of this sort? Somebody tells you, you really need to get into Zen. It's groovy. Okay. So Zen's great. What do I do? Well, there's things you mustn't do and there's things you must do. And it's real important that you meditate. In fact, it's real good if you meditate on these things, these cones, like what is the sound of one hand clapping? And you're going to say what? You call that religion? Oh, yeah. No, apart from saying bogus, you're going to say, Well, who says so? The answer will be Buddha, the enlightened one. But if you've listened to my lecture, you know exactly what to say. Buddha said not to believe it because Buddha said it. Ooh, okay. Let's go back to start. Well, so why should I believe your Zen master here? You can't appeal to Buddha. Well, then how about the Zen master himself? Believe it because he said it. Oh, but according to Buddha, we're not supposed to believe any authorities. We're supposed to experience it. Okay, so now the Buddhist apologist is saying, okay, well then you should believe it because you experience it. And I said, well, but I haven't experienced it. He says, well then you should experience it. I'm saying, I'm trying to find out why I should. I mean, maybe it's really going to be a bummer, you know? I don't know if I want to do this kind of thing. I mean, you can tell the Buddhist, after all. Somebody came along and said, look, there's a cement mixer across the street. Let's go put our heads in it. You were to say, well, I'm not so sure. It looks like a real bummer to me. I don't think I want to try that. Well, you don't know until you experience it, though. Ultimately, I know I'm being playful here, but ultimately the Buddhist is asking you to do what? To turn off your brain and have an experience. And actually, if you do meditation correctly, what it's going to accomplish is mindlessness also. Perfect detachment, no desire, no thought, ergo, no suffering. Well, I mean, I can beat that argument. You know, you blast your brains out and there's no suffering left either. If there's no more me, then there's no more suffering for me, at least on his worldview. But he doesn't believe in that. He believes in life-affirming rather than deathly activities. So Buddhism is full of internal contradictions. It's not just arbitrary, do it because the Buddha said it. After all, if a Buddhist came along and said, here's how you should live your life, you would expect a Confucianist to say, no, Confucius say, do this. Well, who are we going to follow? And the Taoist says, Tien, or the Tao of life. And the Shintoist, you know, has got his kami to tell. When we start doing this eminent moralism thing, we've lost all religious authority. And so it becomes arbitrary. It also becomes inconsistent, as I've been telling you. By the way, Buddha said that man does not have a soul. Siddhartha said there is no soul in man. But that we must be careful of building up bad karma. Now, you should be going, excuse me, what? How can there be bad karma if there's no soul that's going to be passed on? To which Buddha said, notice this is the Platonic, you know, when things get tough, you take Plato's route, appeal to metaphor and myth. He said, well, it's kind of like the flickering candle that passes its flame to another candle. Okay, is that flame me? No, it is not, because there is no soul that's passed on. Oh, but I am passing on my bad karma to somebody. Well, you know what that would, I mean, if I believe that, you know what that would lead me to do? Eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow somebody's going to pay the price. If my bad karma is going somewhere else, then what do I care about it being bad karma? All religions of eminent moralism run into that same kind of difficulty. They cannot give an authoritative reason for living the way that we're supposed to live, and they run into inconsistencies as well. Okay, the biblical counterfeits. How much time do I have for these three religions?
4 minutes.
All right, let's see if you can do it. Do I get 2 extra hours tomorrow?
No, don't finish the answer.
I can't negotiate. All right. Yeah, we'll do it tomorrow. Let me tell you, polytheistically, I'd like to tell you about the Mormons and a real interesting American story here about the Mormon Church. On the Unitarian side, I'm going to deal with Islam, problem with the Quran, and then the pseudo-messianic, I thought we'd look at Sun Myung Moon and the Moonies, just as an example of how to answer these religious worldviews.